In the quiet town of Plattsburgh, Missouri, nestled deep in the heart of the Midwest, a young girl named Julie Irene Oldog, later known as Julie Keown, grew up surrounded by warmth and love. Born on May 16, 1973, she was the firstborn, the big sister to her younger brother Chad, with whom she shared countless childhood memories. The old family lived in a charming farmhouse that radiated the timeless beauty of rural life. Her parents, Nancy and Jack, were admired throughout the community, known for their kindness and honesty. They lived simply, yet their modest life was filled with comfort and pride. Sustained by the hard but rewarding work of farming, life on the farm shaped Julie into someone grounded and resilient. Every sunrise taught her responsibility, every harvest humility. With fields of nature stretching around her and faith woven into her family's daily life, her childhood was a picture of stability and tender care. Julie was unforgettable, gentle, and empathetic. She carried a heart that always reached out to others. Selfless, dependable, and steady, she made those around her feel safe. Even as a young girl, she carried a quiet strength and a growing sense of purpose. In school, she flourished, encouraged every step of the way by her close-knit family. Julie excelled academically, her name often spoken with pride by her teachers. She wasn't just a good student, she was a bright light, destined for something greater. In time, Julie's deep compassion naturally guided her toward a career in nursing. Determined to follow that calling, she enrolled at William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. There, she not only thrived academically, but also built friendships that would stay with her for years. Yet even with all her successes, Julie often felt an emptiness. Many of her friends were finding love, and she too longed for someone to share her journey with. That moment arrived when a mutual friend introduced her to a fellow student on a blind date. His name was James Keown. James, just a year younger, carried a personality that was almost the opposite of Julie's. Charismatic, outspoken, and ambitious, he was well known on campus for his lively work at the college radio station. His dreams were bold. He wanted a career in broadcasting. James came from a privileged background. The Keown family lived comfortably, his father a respected lobbyist, and his mother, Betty, devoted to raising their 6 children. Among them, James stood out. He was confident, magnetic, and never afraid of attention, traits that drew people in, while also sparking envy from others. Yet, when James met Julie, something shifted. Her calming presence soothed his restless energy. Her gentleness steadied his ambition, while his drive and charisma ignited her world. The connection was instant, undeniable. Soon they were inseparably campus couple everyone seemed to know. Together, they balanced one another. Julie's quiet determination, complementing James' boundless enthusiasm while still in college. James secured a position as a local radio host, his voice quickly becoming familiar to listeners across the area. Julie, steadfast as ever, focused on her studies and clinical training, preparing for the demands of nursing. When graduation finally came, the couple took the next big step. They married, full of hope, and relocated to Kansas City, eager to build a future together. Professionally, both began to flourish. Side by side, Julie began her career at a hospital, where her natural empathy and tireless work ethic quickly made her stand out as an extraordinary nurse. Patients trusted her because she saw them as people, with stories and struggles, not just medical cases. Her supervisors admired her dedication, often remarking on the compassion she brought to every shift. Meanwhile, James was carving his own path in the radio world, juggling jobs at 2 stations, while steadily climbing the professional ladder. Together, they looked like the perfect couple, young, ambitious, and driven, yet grounded in love and shared values. Their marriage was a union of Julie's quiet strength and James' public charisma, a balance that seemed unshakable. But as James' career expanded, so did the demands on his time. His schedule filled with meetings, side projects, and commitments that pulled him in every direction. The income was generous, but their home often sat in silence, empty of their presence. Days blurred into long mornings, exhausting work hours, and late nights. Even so, James made efforts to nurture their bond. He surprised Julie with spontaneous weekend getaways, thoughtful gifts, and small gestures that reminded her she was loved. Julie never asked for extravagance, but she cherished these tokens. Her devotion to James was unwavering, deep, steadfast, and without condition. The couple moved frequently to follow James' career opportunities. They spent a period in Chicago before returning to Kansas. And though the changes were difficult, Julie adapted gracefully each time. James' professional reputation grew stronger. With a background in marketing, he impressed employers with his creativity, sharp strategies, and relentless energy. His success was reflected in their lifestyle. The Keowns lived well. Their home was beautiful, their travels frequent, their life outwardly enviable. James liked fine things. He wore his Rolex proudly, drove sleek new cars, and replaced them every few years. Julie, however, found happiness in simplicity, though she supported James' tastes without complaint. Her family noticed this polished picture of success and felt relieved, believing she had found her happily ever after. But in private, there was a void no one else could see. Relatives gently asked about children, not knowing the heartbreak behind the question. Julie and James had been trying for years. They sought specialists, endured endless tests, and clung to hope with every appointment. Still, no answers came. Their infertility had no medical explanation, leaving them caught in a painful limbo, yet they carried on. Julie held on to faith. James threw himself deeper into his ambitions, and together they tried to live with both love and the unspoken weight of dreams they could not yet reach. Though James had already earned local recognition as a radio presenter, his ambitions reached far beyond the Midwest. In 2003, he set his sights on Harvard Business School. When the acceptance letter arrived along with a prestigious scholarship, felt like life had shifted overnight. The Keowns packed up and relocated to Boston, eager to embrace this new chapter. Julie transitioned into remote work in medical software, while James balanced his studies with freelance marketing. For Julie, the move came with a heavy emotional cost. She missed her parents, her brother, and the grounding familiarity of Missouri. Yet, her love for James outweighed her homesickness. She poured herself into supporting him, speaking with pride about his accomplishments, always his most loyal cheerleader. James, meanwhile, thrived in Harvard's competitive atmosphere. Surrounded by sharp, ambitious minds, he polished his image further, determined to climb even higher. But while James chased success, Julie's focus remained on her quiet dream of becoming a mother. That hope, however, was shadowed by something darker. Her health was beginning to unravel. About 8 months into their move, Julie was overtaken by relentless fatigue. Her muscles ached, her immune system weakened, and she found herself falling ill again and again. Countless medical exams provided no answers, leaving her with frustration and fear. Then came the morning of August 20th, 2004. Julie awoke with a crushing headache, her vision swimming as disorientation set in. Her speech slurred, her hands refused to obey, and even gripping a pen became impossible. Panic set in as James rushed her to the hospital. By the time they arrived, her decline was unmistakable. She struggled to sign consent forms, her motor skills slipping away before their eyes. Doctors, alarmed by the severity, launched into urgent testing. The results pointed toward kidney complications. For Julie, the diagnosis was devastating. Her kidneys were failing. At last, some pieces seemed to connect. Perhaps her long struggle with infertility had been tied all along to an undetected renal condition. But still, the puzzle refused to fit neatly. Her symptoms: muscle weakness, confusion, and crushing Fatigue suggested something more unusual than standard kidney disease. Some specialists whispered about rare disorders, but no clear explanation emerged. Julie spent 3 days in the hospital, her family holding their breath. Then, almost inexplicably, her condition began to improve. Without major intervention, her strength returned enough for doctors to discharge her, though they remained unsettled by the mystery. Eager for comfort, Julie traveled back to Missouri to be with her family. Surrounded by familiar faces and the quiet rhythms of home, she seemed to bloom again. Her energy returned, her smile brightened, and her loved ones were reassured that maybe the worst had passed, but hope would not last. Shortly after returning to Boston, Julie's strange symptoms crept back: dizziness, fatigue, and slurred speech, though milder than before. Her family grew deeply worried, while doctors suggested another possibility, maybe the stress of infertility, the move, and the emotional toll of so many changes were manifesting physically. Could this all be psychological? Even physicians entertained the idea. Yet beneath those theories lingered a chilling uncertainty. What if something far more serious was silently unfolding within her? Tragedy struck on September 4, 2004, just 2 weeks after Julie's first hospitalization. Her condition suddenly spiraled out of control. She was rushed back to the hospital, but this time the situation was far graver. Julie could barely form words. Her body was nearly paralyzed, and within hours, she slipped into a coma. Doctors quickly realized her kidneys were only part of the problem. Something far more devastating and far more mysterious was attacking her body. Despite desperate efforts, her organs began shutting down one by one. Tests offered no clear answers. Then, almost by chance, a nurse disturbed by the unusual progression of symptoms suggested a toxicology screening. It wasn't a standard step in cases like this, but her intuition proved critical. When the results came back, they revealed a horrifying truth. Julie had ethylene glycol in her system, a toxic chemical most commonly found in antifreeze, deadly when ingested. Its effects perfectly mirrored Julie's decline: kidney failure, confusion, and rapid physical deterioration. It was now undeniable. Julie had been poisoned that very day. As she lay unresponsive in her hospital bed, her family rushed to her side. They were shattered by what they saw: Julie, just 31 years old, unable to speak or even open her eyes. There was nothing left to do but wait. 4 days later, on September 8, 2004, Julie passed away. The news devastated everyone who knew her. Only days earlier, she had been laughing with loved ones, full of hope, and now she was gone. As toxicology results surfaced, suspicions immediately turned to foul play. Someone had deliberately given her the poison, and the circle of possible suspects was narrow. Attention quickly fell on her husband, James. Detectives were already gathering evidence: medical files, witness statements, and personal items from their home. Publicly, James played the role of a grieving husband. He spoke of shock, sorrow, and confusion. He denied any involvement, even suggesting that Julie may have poisoned herself, perhaps overwhelmed by infertility struggles, the stress of relocation, or depression. But many weren't convinced. The nurse who had first pushed for toxicology later confided that James' behavior at the hospital had unsettled her. He frequently answered questions meant for Julie, dominated discussions with doctors, and seemed determined to control every detail of her care. To her, something felt off. Some chalked up his behavior to worry, believing he was simply advocating for his wife, but others found his explanations disturbing. At one point, James suggested Julie might have accidentally ingested antifreeze, mistaking it for another liquid. Investigators, meanwhile, uncovered a possible motive. Julie had a $250,000 life insurance policy. On the surface, not a fortune for a man who appeared successful. Yet, cracks in James' image were beginning to show. Was his wealth genuine, or Just an illusion? The answer came quickly. Julie's landlord in Boston contacted authorities with troubling news. James had vanished without notice, leaving behind unpaid rent and a trail of abandonment. Among the possessions he discarded were heartbreaking reminders of Julie, their wedding rings, her wedding dress, and photographs from their ceremony. Items no grieving husband would normally cast aside. It was soon discovered that James had returned to Missouri, where he secured a job as a local radio talk show host, eager to begin anew, as though nothing had happened. Investigators dug deeper and uncovered shocking details. His luxury car had been repossessed. His Boston apartment rent had gone unpaid for months. Most damning of all, the prestigious acceptance to Harvard Business School had been a complete fabrication. James had forged the letter, an elaborate lie used to justify working remotely for a marketing company. The perfect life he had crafted was crumbling, and now, with Julie dead, investigators suspected that his carefully built facade had concealed something much darker. That same company had once hired James to create a website, a high-stakes project that promised him a generous paycheck. But instead of rising to the challenge, James let it crumble. No results ever surfaced. Whether it was incompetence or sheer negligence, no one could say for sure. What did become clear, however, was devastating. James had been quietly siphoning off the very funds meant for the project. His carefully crafted resume was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, boasting jobs at companies where he had never even set foot. Not even Julie, his wife, had seen through his deception. Every morning, James pretended to head off to work, only to return with new furniture and cling to the illusion of their lavish life. Beneath the surface, though, everything was collapsing. Bills were piling up, the electricity teetered on the brink of disconnection, and his so-called career was non-existent. With no steady income, the one thing that began to gleam in his troubled mind was Julie's life insurance policy. To him, it no longer looked like a safety net, but a ticket to survival. Back in Missouri, James began spinning a web of lies to anyone who would listen. Sometimes, he claimed Julie had died from a sudden, mysterious illness. Other times, he suggested she had taken her own life. The stories shifted depending on who asked, but one detail remained chillingly consistent. When pressed on what he planned to do with the payout, James casually admitted he'd buy himself a sleek Mercedes, as if that wasn't disturbing enough. James bragged that he was already seeing someone new, hoping to build a family as though his past had never existed. All the while, detectives tightened the net around him. Suspicion grew heavier by the day, yet evidence remained elusive. His actions raised every red flag imaginable, but legally, the case still felt fragile. Friends remembered James making unsettling remarks, insisting he wouldn't be convicted, since after all, it's only circumstantial. Not once did he flatly deny involvement in Julie's death. That silence haunted everyone who knew him. Investigators dug deeper, combing through every trace of his life. They searched his home, his family's property, even the Boston apartment. Each time, they came up empty. Then, finally, a breakthrough. Forensic experts unearthed chilling fragments from James' computer, fragments he had desperately tried to erase. Search terms like how to get rid of someone and antifreeze poisoning painted a horrifying picture. Even more disturbing, the toxicology results lined up perfectly with those very searches. Soon, a darker truth emerged. Weeks before Julie's death, James had been encouraging her to drink Gatorade, claiming it would help her health. Tests later revealed the poison had likely been slipped to her in small doses, explaining the mysterious illness Julie had suffered back in August. Piece by piece, prosecutors assembled the puzzle. In 2005, James was arrested, and by 2008, he was finally brought to trial. The road ahead wasn't easy. Prosecutors faced the immense challenge of proving guilt without a smoking gun. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. James' crumbling finances, his fraudulent identity, the timing of Julie's decline, all wove together into a chilling narrative. For many, it was heartbreaking. People who once admired him struggled to reconcile the loving husband they thought they knew with the monster revealed in court. The defense fought back fiercely. They argued Julie's emotional pain, her infertility struggles, and her poor health might have led her to ingest antifreeze herself, either by accident or in a tragic act of despair. They cast doubt on the toxicology reports and timelines. Most importantly, they emphasized that not a single witness had seen James slip poison into her drink, but the jury wasn't fooled. James' search history, the suspicious Gatorade, the greed over insurance money, and his endless lies were too overwhelming. Even without the missing antifreeze container, the evidence was undeniable. Julie's final letters to friends, where she mentioned James caring for her, and him encouraging her to drink that vitamin-laced beverage she hated, became haunting echoes of betrayal. The final blow came after the funeral. Without hesitation, James rushed to claim the insurance payout, his griefless demeanor confirming what many already suspected. In 2008, James Keown was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The court declared he had methodically, coldly, and deliberately poisoned his wife, lacing her drinks with ethylene glycol, the lethal substance in antifreeze. To this day, James insists he is innocent, but for Julie's family, there is no doubt that justice was done. In 2017, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court upheld his conviction, stating the evidence against him was overwhelming. Julie Keown, remembered as a compassionate nurse, a devoted wife, and a loving daughter, was taken far too soon. Her warmth and kindness still echo in the hearts of those who knew her, and her story continues to symbolize the pursuit of truth and justice. Thank you for watching Twisted True Crime. If you want to explore more mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we uncover gripping true crime stories from across Latin America. Subscribe now so you don't miss our next investigation.